26 more of these matches this season. What a night!
Well, you'll get 2 more at least, Adam. But welcome to the CPL Newsroom presented by Volkswagen. Match week 13. Happy belated Canada Day to everybody. We hope that your long weekend was as much fun as it was for us in the Canadian Premier League. Because we had some pretty entertaining games this weekend, a lot of goals. We're going to jump right into it. Let's start with just a quick rundown of the results so that we can catch ourselves up, because last Friday was quite a long time ago as we talked to you here on Wednesday afternoon. But, you know, as implied in the intro there, Pacific FC 4, Vancouver FC 4. That was an absolutely wild game, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about here, I think. Followed up on Saturday by Cavalry 0, Atletico Ottawa 2. Another win for Ottawa in the den of the champions this year. That is an impressive story as well. 9:05 Derby Day on Sunday. Forge 2, York United 2. That was the only soccer game played on that day. Certainly there was no football played in anywhere like Minneapolis. That's for sure. And then we had our Canada Day Classic, as always, in Halifax on Tuesday. That was the Wanderers 3, Valor FC 1. Where Valor led at halftime and then didn't lead at the end of the game thanks to a pretty good explosion in the second half from the Wanderers. But we start out west because that was an absolute Salish Sea Derby classic at Starlight Stadium in BC. Pacific FC 4, Vancouver 4. It was 2-0 at one point for Pacific. It was 2-2. It was 3-2 for Pacific. It was 4-3 for Vancouver. And then it was 4-4 at the end thanks to a Caden Chung shot that went off the back of Callum Irving's face, I think. We're going to go on this game for quite a while because we just have to kind of sift through everything that happened and recap it all. Alex Gangué-Ruzic, you were there on the ground in British Columbia. What happened? What was it like being in the stadium for a game as electric as this? And how many times did you have to Control A and delete your entire match recap?
I mean, it was the last 10 minutes is where things got really crazy. Because for a while it was back and forth. Then the last 10 minutes, I think I was still trying to write up the Pate Indiaye goal when Caden Chunks went in. I was still 2 or 3 goals behind, but it was just electric because it just kind of came out of nowhere. For a while, Pacific were up 1-0 at halftime. And they were up 2-0, and you're kind of like, that's game over. That's pretty safe lead for them. And then Henry Goboot scores a nice chip, as for those watching on screen will see. And then also David Norman scored, and it was 2-2. And then from there, it just kind of descended into chaos. It just became a back and forth, wide open game, and the goals started to pour. And it's not often that a game reaches 2-2 or 3-2 at the 80th minute, and then there's 3 more goals left in it. But it was just that kind of match. All of a sudden, everything that the attackers started to touch turned to gold, and everything the defenders were doing just went wrong. So no, this derby, for whatever reason, has continued to deliver. If you look at it, I think the stat I had when I was counting through, there's been 11 of them, 10 in the CPL, 1 in the Can Champ, 40 goals, 12 of them past the 75th minute. For whatever reason, there's a lot of goals and a lot of late goals.
Yeah, I mean, almost half of them have come in 2 games because there was this one in a 6-3 back in 2023. But yeah, you look at the timestamps of the goals here, right? Ndom scores the 2-0 goal at 54. And then Henry Gobout scores the first Vancouver goal at 55. They're equal by the 64th minute. It's kind of spun out of control a little bit. And both teams kind of gave up on playing defense in the last 20 minutes or so. They both clearly felt goals in this game. They could smell blood in the water, and they were going at it. Interesting, though, Vancouver 2.18 expected goals for their 4. Pacific FC scored 4 goals with 0.67 expected goals. Maybe let's just sift through where these teams are after this game, because it's a crazy game. It's 4-4, and both of them had chances to win it. But at the end of the day, it's a point each that doesn't actually help either of them that much. Mitch, we'll bring you in here maybe because we're looking at the league as a whole. Which of these teams do you think is happier coming out of a game like this?
Oh man, that's a really difficult.
It might be neither.
Yeah, it might be neither, honestly, because this was a game where both teams really needed 3 points, and yes,
yeah,
I do think the goals are a little bit helpful, just considering again, there have just been so few of them for both teams, and that will help the confidence, but at the same time, like this was a game where both of them had it circled on their calendar where it's like this could finally be our chance to win against a rival. Maybe Vancouver's like slightly happier just because they were able to get Mosquito back. Obviously, he scored. Like
Yeah.
they were trailing for maybe longer in the game, so to be able to get a point out of it, shows good fight back from them. But I think at the end of the day, both teams had the lead. Both teams, coughed them up. I don't think anyone's coming out of this one particularly happy.
I don't think so either. Like, yeah, I think I agree that it's a better result for Vancouver being on the road and fighting back from 2 goals down. But when you're leading in the 91st, 92nd minute, and you give up a goal after you've just scored in injury time, that is a huge punch in the gut. So that's definitely a tough one for them to take as well. But you mentioned the Pacific have not been scoring a lot, and they get 4 here. Hilariously, they now finish June with 5 goals, which is more than Cavalry and Valor had in a whole month, despite how little Pacific was scoring in the month. But AGR as a whole, let's go into this. You mentioned how many good games we've had in this derby. We've had 2 draws now in the CPL this year, plus that penalty shootout in the Canadian Championship. You're wondering if the Salish Sea Derby is now the best in the Canadian Premier League. Why? Explain that.
Yeah, look, I won't pretend to say, because this is very subjective in terms of what is a good derby, what is the best matchup. There's different categories to it. Like at the end of the day, the best derby, the best rivalry is going to continue to be Forge and Cavalry just because they continue to play on the biggest stages, the best games. I would throw an argument for York, Ottawa, 'cause for whatever reason, there's a bit of bad blood, a bit of, energy that comes out that you want in a derby. But for whatever reason, Vancouver Pacific, at least for me, is the most entertaining. And sometimes that's good to have in a derby. These two teams play each other and there's just drama. There is red cards, there is chaos. I think it helps that there's a lot of former players on both teams. Sometimes there's a little bit of that. Yeah, I want to go out and again, I really like this guy. That's a former teammate of mine. I want to get him back. I want to get that sort of energy and it's also I like that when both teams play each other, they kind of recognize like usually it means something. Usually they've been close in the table too, which can sometimes help. They want to go out and entertain and make things happen. So for me, for my money, it's hard to look at a bigger like 11 game sample size in between two teams and just see such a list of entertaining games, because I could think of it. We had this 4-4, you had the 6-3 you mentioned, which is one of the most wild games. There was a 3-2 at Willoughby Community Park, I remember, where similar weird moment, Gabby Batar scored and it slipped through Emil Gazdov's hands. There's Manny Aparicio scoring the late winner in the first ever derby and shushing the away Vancouver support in their first ever game. The Can Champ game, new competition, it goes all the way to penalties, a great shootout. Like this derby is entertaining, and I think in football, when sometimes this sport we forget is about entertainment, it's about having fun. I've been to 10 of these derbies now, and every time I've left thinking like, wow. And you don't always get that in derbies because they'll be cagey, low event, safe. And I like that these two teams don't do that. There's been 2 clean sheets, I think the stat is in the history. It's not one for defenders.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that these two teams bring out the best in each other, but it might just bring out the most chaotic in each other. And you mentioned how many players are familiar with one another. I think I count 5 players in this game that have played for both teams. And obviously Alejandro Diaz not playing for Vancouver at the moment after his loan has ended. But man, that was a lot of fun. Like it's a pretty intense derby when the last time they met in Vancouver, you have Kunle Dadaluk, who played for Pacific for so many years, getting himself sent off against his former team like that. A lot of fun. And we do look forward to seeing these teams meet up again. I believe the next one is in early August, and then they're meeting in downtown Victoria in September, which will be a lot of fun. That'll be a good event between the BC derby rivals. But both still outside the playoffs right now. A point not really doing a lot of good for either side. So we'll see how they use their little bit of time to prepare ahead of their next meetings. Vancouver's next game is in the Can Champ, by the way, against Cavalry FC. But we'll move on from there because Cavalry and Atletico Ottawa was the Saturday game, and I don't know if I really fully realized how good Ottawa have been against Cavalry FC over the years. They've only, I think, lost at Atco Field once in their entire history. That was back in 2023. And Ottawa haven't been the league leaders throughout this history. There have been years where they have not been that good a team and still managed to cause problems for Calgary. But twice in a row now this year, they have gone into the home of the champions, played a very difficult game, and won, by 2 goals. And this game is not quite as chaotic as the last time, where it's the Cam Damone goal, then a red card, then a goal in transition, and suddenly Cavalry are just out of it and it's over within 5 minutes. But it is a couple of quick moments. Atletico Ottawa scored that first goal pretty early, thanks to Kevin Dos Santos, and a great ball from Juan Castro, who kind of sets a trap for Cavalry. It's a really clever goal from Atletico Ottawa, where they know that they're going to be pressed by Cavalry, who love to do that. So they invite it. They bring the press in, they absorb it, and then it's a ball over the top, and that transitional pace. And then, the second goal that kind of dooms Cavalry is Sam Salter, 9th goal of the year, and possibly one of his easier ones, although shout out Manny Aparicio, winning the ball from a pretty brutal pass by Marco Carducci and setting up Salter for a good finish. Salter, by the way, on pace to smash some goal scoring records in the CPL this year. His personal high in the league is 11. He's at 9 now, and I would be stunned if he had not passed that by like the end of July, frankly, at this point. But Mitch, we'll go back to you. Atletico Ottawa, man, I think it's 4 clean sheets in a row for this club against a Cavalry team that is very, very, very dangerous and very difficult to attack. Just how impressive is it that they can continue doing this week in, week out, especially with, as we've mentioned, so many young players in their defense?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly impressive. And you see, guys like Tier Walker, Loic Cloutier, Noah Batney just continue to reach that next level. But, I think a guy that maybe we haven't been talking about enough is Nate Ingham in goal, for multiple reasons. Those 3 guys don't exist in a vacuum, right? Like, they have experienced teammates around them who are helping them out. And Nate Ingham's job, and you can hear him, on this broadcast, on other broadcasts, the job he does to organize them, to consistently be on their case, even when they're building out from the back, to find pockets to be available as an option. Like, that's so important. And, his performance, again, like, there's always going to be moments when you play like Ottawa where the other team's going to come down and have some good opportunities. Ingham made 15 saves this month, didn't let in a single goal. And, they allowed 2.72 expected goals on target, and, he kept it all out. So this is a guy who continues to step up for them and continues to be so important. And, obviously, you don't have 4 clean sheets without your goalkeeper, but I think that he's had a bit of an elevated role that deserves to be talked about in what he's done this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to argue with just not letting in goals for pretty much an entire month. And yeah, Ingham, obviously a CPL original, who I think is probably playing his best football of his CPL career this year with Atletico Ottawa. But this Ottawa team, we gotta talk about them more, because they're just so incredibly impressive. They got 28 points. They've scored 30 goals. They have only hit 40 goals in a season once in their history, and that was last year. They're on pace for 64, which would absolutely destroy the CPL record of 51 set by Cavalry back in 2019. But there's so many things that we like about this team that are going right. AGR, I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you, of these things, which is the most important to Atletico Ottawa's success this year? Is it the individual attacking talent? Is it the defenders? Is it coaching? What is the major and biggest key to this club's success right now?
It's a good question. It's $1 million question. I would probably lean coaching, just because for me, when you have a team where everyone's having a good season, like everyone, there's no guy you're looking at like, this guy is performing below his capacity. You look how young they are too. Like, they're also quietly, again, they smashed the U21 minutes requirement, something they haven't always done the greatest job of doing in past years. And they're continuing to, right? It's not like token minutes, like they say. They continue to rely on youth. The system, how they've evolved, how they went from scoring goals to fun. Oh yeah, you can manage a game. You can keep a bunch of clean sheets when clean sheets were hard to come by. You have to look at coaching. So I'll go coaching, just because, when you got Kevin Dos Santos, Gabriel Antonoro in new positions at wingback, lighting it up on both sides of the pitch. You got what Manny Aparicio and Koke Castro are doing in the midfield together. What you got David Rodriguez, the way the system is structured to make him look like an incredible talent and for him to thrive in that. For Sam Salter, like we mentioned, to be having a career year, looking better than he's ever had up front. Balou Tabla, a former guy who was nominated for an MVP award a few years ago. Just the quiet cog in the system giving you a lot. And then, of course, the back three with the kids and Nate Ingham in goal. I think Diego Mia has to be given all credit to how he's elevated every single one of them. And that's exciting because there's guys off the bench we're not even talking about that have contributed, other youngsters. And I think Mejia has proven that should anyone go down due to injury, should anything happen, because it's a long season, should they hit any adversity, I think they're going to handle it and keep going it. Because so far they've played almost every team twice and haven't shown signs of slowing down. And I think he knows what this league's about, like in the sense sometimes new coaches can get excited and the first 7 games goes great. But he has been prepared for the fact that he's playing everyone 4 times, that he's going to have to evolve. I like that he's been ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I also love that they've shown that they can win in different ways. There are games like the Valor game a couple of weeks ago where they're under pressure a little bit, but their plan in the second half was to kind of control the ball and move them side to side and kind of take the energy out of a Valor side that wanted to press them. A game like this where they don't have as much of the ball, they're not moving it around, trying to pull them out of position. They're just looking for those transition moments against Cavalry. They're looking to counter press. And there's the ugly ones. There's a game in Pacific that they won 1-0 where they needed a Balou Tabla penalty. Or there's the draw at York, the 0-0, where I honestly truly believe that they were very happy with getting out of that with a 0-0. They just held onto the ball, knocked it around for 90 minutes, and went home with their point, which is honestly, it was an impressive thing to do in that heat. Like, there's just so many ways that this Ottawa team is able to win games right now. And as you mentioned, AGR, it's such a good point that almost every single player on his team is playing their best football at the moment, which again is a massive credit to coaching. Not a lot to say about Cavalry this week. I don't think it's a great game for them. I don't think they were particularly bad. It's just a couple of moments they didn't manage very well. But that happens. It's frustrating to them that they keep losing to Ottawa. But I think that's one of those weird things in football where a team just has your number in a season. However, it would not be at all surprising if we see them play each other in the playoffs at some point this year. And obviously Cavalry have a trip to Ottawa as well coming up. But let's go on to that 9:05 derby. Mitchell Tierney, you were watching this game with both eyes, I'm 100% sure, because you were there and there was nothing else on your laptop screen next to you in the press box at Hamilton Stadium. 9:05 derby, always a lot of fun. More fun this year, I think, for a neutral than it was last year, where York didn't score and lost a lot. Two all draws so far this year. York have led in both of them, though. So you have been impressed by the pressure York have been able to put Forge under this year, and you're wondering if they are closing the gap a little bit on Forge.
Well, that was kind of the goal when the Pascal brothers came in, is they said they wanted to put pressure on, their closest neighbors and their rivals in Forge. And they go out in that first season, and again, they don't score a league goal against them. They lose 3 of those 4 games. Like, that's not a great start to that goal. But this year, I think they've played Forge as well as anyone. This was probably the closest that any teams come to beating Forge, both in terms of performance and in terms of how late it went in the game before Forge were able to equalize. Again, they've scored 4 of the 9 goals that Forge have conceded this year, and I think a big reason for that is the way that they're able to play and attack and the number of different attacking options they have in this game. Really in transition, they're able to win the ball back and then just quickly find those pockets of space between the Forge midfield and their back line. And, I know Forge will certainly put their hand up and say defensively we weren't great on both those sequences, but at the same time, I love how quickly they move the ball through the lines. Adonijah Reed is quickly becoming an important player, I think, for this York team in terms of his ability to dribble through the lines and his great combination play in the final third. And we see that in this game, goal and an assist, and probably the best we've seen him in a York United shirt. So I think there's a lot to like about the way York's playing. And every time they have a game like this, and it's consistently where they're playing well against the top teams, they draw the top two teams of the CPL over the past two games, and arguably probably could have won both of those games and had, the better bulk of chances. Like, I think this grows the confidence of this team, where they've been close in basically every match this season. It's been, maybe one or two goals either way, but now they're getting results and they're scoring consistently as well. So I think that York are getting closer to not only Forge, but, that top four group. But I think York have a case to be made that they're kind of, slowly chasing them down, maybe not in terms of points, but certainly in terms of belief.
They are scoring consistently, but what I will say about York is that they do need to start turning some of these games where they're leading into wins, right? They've dropped 16 points from winning positions still this year. And I know it's always a good result if you go to Hamilton and get a point out of it, and especially when you score 2 goals there. But at a point, Mario Eustachio has brought this up a couple of times this year, that they need to find ways to kill off games. If they have a lead, they need to score again and put a game away. And I think that will be... I think that they'll be more frustrated than you are, Mitchell, coming out of this one. Even though obviously, again, it is always a good result to get a point out of Hamilton. This is a team that has higher aspirations than that. And they, the fact is, yes, they've got 2 draws against Forge this year, but they haven't beaten Forge since 2023, right? I think they're winless in their last 9 against Forge at the moment, which is frustrating for a club who want to definitely even up this derby. But it's very hard to argue with a Forge team that has not lost in its first 12 games of the CPL season. That is outrageously impressive at this point. And Mitch, you're noticing that it was their depth in part that carried them through against York.
Yeah, I mean, again, they came out and they weren't particularly good in the first half. They let in 2 very non-Forge goals against. It seems like York have all the momentum going into the second half, and then you could bring Tristan Borges and David Chouanier off the bench at any point for any team.
I hear those guys are good.
Game. Yeah, not bad. And Chouanier obviously ultimately gets the goal, but this is a real question and it is every year for Forge, but specifically this year, I think when they're rolling so much, they just have so much depth right now, and even like picking a projected 11 for them right now, it's like, do you put Alex Janssen in the midfield, or do you push him back into defense with how good Maliku Olabibelu has been? You've got to get Becker in there somehow. You got to get Borges and Chouanier in there somehow now. Potentially, Masunda's been so good. You can't drop Ampoma. Obviously, Brian Wright's going to lead the line, but there's just so, Jensen, like Hajabrapor doesn't even play in this game. He's got a bit of an injury right now he's working back from, but once he comes back, like, that's even more difficult. It's going to be really difficult for Bobby Smirniotis, but I think going to be even more difficult for opponents to project which Forge team you're getting on a weekly basis. But then, to have that plan B where it's like, okay, we've dealt with, Masunda and Ampoma for 60 odd minutes here. Okay, here comes Chouanier and Borges. And, that's the difference for this game against York is, obviously Borges finds Rama and then he picks out Chouanier, and all of a sudden it's an equalizer. So this is going to be, Forge are undefeated, but they're only getting better. And that's a massive issue, I think, for the rest of the Canadian Premier League.
It is an issue for the rest of the CPL. It's also an issue for CF Montreal because they play them next week. And I want to touch on this quickly because I'm very interested in how Forge approaches the next few days from here. They play Vancouver FC on Saturday. It's the only CPL game of the weekend, by the way. And then they're in Montreal next Wednesday. We know Forge are testing their depth. They're bringing players back from injury. Maybe AGR, if you're Bobby Smirniotis, how are you approaching this Vancouver game in terms of, integrating players into this lineup that are coming back from injury while also balancing, knowing that some of these guys, you need them to be at the top of their game for that game in Montreal?
Yeah, well, I think based on what we've known about Bobby Smirniotis and how he handles it, his full focus will be on CF Montreal. They won't say it, they won't, admit it, but we saw that last year. They had a similar scenario where they had a couple guys coming back injured. The same thing for both Toronto and Montreal, what they played last year. And they do it well where they've got the depth. They know they'll put together a lineup, no matter who it is, that will, be able to go out and get a job done against Vancouver. But they'll do what it takes to, maybe it'll be a David Chouanier start if that's what he needs in his recovery to be at his best for Montreal. Or it'll be Chouanier off the bench for some of the guys who've played heavy minutes. We wouldn't be surprised. Granted, they've done a great job over the last month. Like, don't sleep on the fact that Kyle Becker got a full, game off a couple weeks back. That Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic got a full game off when they came to Vancouver, I think it was. So he's already been subtly preparing, and I think he's just going to continue doing that, because that's something Forge they don't get a lot of credit for, but they're so deep that they quietly throughout a season make sure that guys don't accumulate. But when it comes to Montreal, you're going to see all the big guns like a Becker. You're going to see Achinoti Janssen, Hojabrpour all together. We'll see whoever is the fittest and prepared of, a right flanked by, will it be Masunda? Will it be Borges? Will it be Chouanière? But they obviously have the depth and the luxury to do that as a club, and they do it well.
I mean, Mo Babuli didn't even play this week. We don't know what the situation is with him either. Like there are some.
You forget about guys on Fords like
Bobby
that's
the thing. That's the thing. It's like, oh, there's a guy that would be like a for sure starter on pretty much any other team in the league. Didn't notice he wasn't. I actually don't think I know what Forge's best 11 is at the moment, but I'm sure Bobby has an idea, and I'm sure that's what we're going to see on Wednesday against CF Montreal. Those Canadian Championship games will be a lot of fun, by the way. A lot of CPL teams in action. We could get 4 CPL teams in the Can Champ semifinals. However, one of those teams that we would need to win to make that happen is Valor FC, and that's the game we're going to next. It was the Canada Day game. Halifax 3, Valor 1, even though Valor had the lead at halftime after scoring a very, very bizarre goal. Keane Williams kind of finishing a clearance that came off, I think, Kareem So's face and landed for Williams for his first goal in well over a year, though. So good for him and on his birthday as well. So congratulations. But, not the happiest of birthdays, because they did squander that lead and they lost 3-1. Halifax, an impressive one for me. And I think what I've liked most about watching Halifax this season is how committed they are to playing a type of way. They're very patient. They fall behind, and they're still, not really panicking. They're still methodically looking for ways to pull Valor apart, to wear them down, they play a lot of these balls into the box, these crosses, and eventually they work. But the depth also is a huge thing for them in this game, because they're able to bring Vitor Diaz off the bench and Jason Bahambula off the bench. And that changes things entirely, because Bahambula nearly wins a penalty, probably should have, honestly. Makes the run to create the second, or the Vitor Diaz goal that ended up as a winner, then goes on to assist Thiago Coimbra's second goal of the game and Halifax's third. Just bringing that energy and just absolutely running at an already pretty tired Roberto Alarcon there, which is just so impressive that Halifax are able to do that with players who often aren't frustrated when they're put on the bench for a game. Mitchell, we've spoken so much about Forge's depth, but I think Halifax's depth is something that we need to talk about as well. How nice a problem must it be for Patrice Geyser to be able to bring players like that off his bench?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in earlier shows. Like, this is the difference from past Halifax teams, where you look to your bench, and if Plan A wasn't working, like you weren't really sure what to do. And again, it's been something where Patrice hasn't necessarily used them, use some of his options to the best of their abilities. But yeah, you have difference makers off the bench, and even the way that those guys can come in and provide a different level of service for a guy like Coimbra, who obviously had played all game and been doing his thing up top. But it's impressive that when he gets those last couple opportunities late in the game, when you've been tired out for the entire game, he takes them. Obviously, I think I maybe could have scored the second one, but nevertheless, you have to get up the field and get into that position, which is one thing. But I think really for me, the takeaway is that this was kind of a sliding doors game for Valor a little bit. Like, they needed, for Halifax rather. They needed to get this result, both teams really, but for Halifax, like, they needed to get this result. Otherwise, it's 1 in their past 5, and you're starting to lose the chase a little bit, and now it's 2 in your past 5, and you drew 1 of them. Like, you're and 2 wins in a row, obviously, as well. Like, it's such a difference maker in one game like that, and how that can change the narrative around a team. And obviously, if that had come against a Valor team that's struggling as well, that would have made it even more difficult. So yeah, I think Halifax are deeper than they've been in past seasons. They're getting results that they wouldn't have done in past seasons, and that's why again, they're keeping chase with that top group.
Yeah, I mean, Patrice Geyser pointed out that Sean Rea hadn't started for 3 games. He comes into this one over Giorgio Probo, who isn't really fazed by being asked to come off the bench and shore things up late in this game, such as the commitment to identity and the way that this Halifax team wants to play. Valor, frustrated. It's they really wanted to respond after losing 5-0 to Forge. They looked like they were going to, and it's not the first time this year that they've started well and looked like they were on their way to a pretty impressive result, and then it just kind of falls apart. They get tired, they get frustrated. Obviously, we should point out that the first goal, the equalizer, Zach Fernandez is off the pitch getting treatment, and Phil DeSantis kind of pointed out that he probably would have been in the space that Coimbra ran into on the right side, but the flip side that DeSantis mentioned, that is, even when that does happen, you can't let it get to your head and then concede another and then a third. You have to kind of recollect yourself and get back to it. But most frustrating for Valor is they've scored first, I think, 3 times this year and won none of those games now, which is maybe a mark of how much difficulty they've had staying on top in games and pressing advantages when they do play well in the first half. But they move on. Again, they have the Whitecaps next week, which is going to be a tough game for them. But they've got a 2-2 draw in the tie on aggregate at the moment, and we did see that last game bring out the best in them. So it might come at a good time for this Valor club. But anyway, let's wrap it up by just a quick look down at the CPL standings. Atletico Ottawa, as mentioned, still on top, 28 points, followed by Halifax in second. Forge level on 24 points, but 1 fewer win, so they're in third. Cavalry fourth. York fifth, as they have been for a while. And the bottom 3 remains Pacific, Valor, Vancouver FC. Only one CPL game coming up this weekend, and that is Forge versus Vancouver FC on Saturday. That game's on TSN. Do not miss that one. It'll be a lot of fun. And we will be back at some point, I think, next week. We'll discuss how we want to break things down. I think because we're getting to the middle of the season, it'll be time to maybe gauge where teams are at the moment. Maybe do a little bit of awards predictions at the midway point of the season. But we will see you at some point. And until then, thank you very much for joining us.
CPL all-timer! I want 26 more of these matches this season. What a night!